things like that. So these are a lot of things that we think are important. And I know that a good friend of mine, Miss Brown, is on here and she's out there. And I know Miss Brown, hopefully you have some questions. So Suzette Brown, uh, she works in the community with some mental health uh, programs, and she's been trying to do a lot in South Fulton, and we certainly want to support her on what she's doing with that. But one of the things that I think that we talked about is this being just a stigma in our community. And tell us what you think about that, Church.
Well, that's something that is generations of stigma. And we've made some progress in that area, but we still have a lot more work to do because in the Black community, there's a lot of stigma. One, you're telling people outside of our house or our business. And so some families like, well, you don't, whatever happens in this house stays in the house. You don't put people in your business. Why do you want to go talk to a stranger? Oh, you're crazy. Pray about it. It's all these different other avenues that they prefer to use, whether effective or not, than to actually seek professional help. And not understanding that it's about your quality of life. If you go speak to a professional and you can have a good quality of life, or you can not speak to a professional and then your quality of life is poor and you're suffering unnecessarily and you're in pain, and you're just not as happy as you could be because you refuse to get the assistance that you need. And there's also a concern of like, well, if I go speak to a therapist, then does that question my faith in God? And you can have a therapist in God as well. Like, it's just like you have a physician in God. It doesn't subtract God out of your life because you go to someone that's professionally trained to handle the issues that you have. And so really trying to influence and just break that stigma, it takes time. It took years and years and years to build this stigma and for it to go into future generations. It's not going to happen overnight that we just say, you know what, it's healthy, it's great, bam, snap our fingers and it's broken. And so we can see that there are people that are more interested in seeking mental health services. They are advocating. There are some religious communities that embrace it more than others. And so really just working hard and understanding that there is a root to the stigma, but when you know better, you do better. And so getting that information and making sure that people feel comfortable. And it's also effective to have like someone that looks like you, because there's also mistrust in, when I go to therapy, if I go to therapy, they think about the movies, they think about someone's going to look down on them. And so for you to come in and come see me, and depending on your style of your therapist, it just feels like we're talking. So it's like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, oh, okay. But in their mind, they just vision like I'm laying on the couch and they're looking down on me. And how does that make you feel? And this is stuck up, uncomfortable environment. And so it's always, refreshing when I have new clients come in, especially men. I just had a new client come in, an African-American male that's in his 40s. And so he was like really reluctant and like, I don't know what to expect and what is this? And I'm here, but I don't know. And then right into the session, like once he got comfortable and realized, he was like, this isn't that bad. And we were just off and running. And it was so therapeutic and so helpful. So I like to do these type of forums because you can see a therapist that you can kind of put a picture to like in reality versus what you see in the movies, and understanding like we're people too. Like I'm not there to judge you. I'm not there to tell you what to do. I'm there to support you and encourage you and guide you. And you have to find a therapist that works for you and you have the right chemistry and connection. And then when you have that good therapeutic relationship, then you're able to effectively process and deal with the stuff that you need to deal with so you can have a better quality of life and heal. And so that's why I think, just breaking the stigma, it just takes consistent advocacy and consistent work of like, hey, this is me, I'm here, it's okay. Every good therapist has a therapist. That's one of my favorite phrases. I have a therapist. I can't take on all this stuff and not have someone that I can talk to, because I'm going to be traumatized through all the stuff that I'm helping other people process through. So you can't internalize all these things that you're experiencing as a therapist, as a student, as a parent, and think it's not going to impact your daily life. Because even your student, sometimes parents are like, well, I don't understand. What do you mean, trauma my child ain't never been abused. My child's never experienced this, but your child's best friend has. Your child's cousin has. And that child has been talking to that other student or that other family member. And so they may not have directly experienced a trauma, but they're holding that stuff in because they've taken it on because they've heard it from other people. And so being mindful that that can be impactful as well.
Now, like I said, when we like last year when we talked, and you know the person that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
This was a student at Westlake, uh, and she was a cheerleader,
Mhm.
and and I guess, and I saw her, like, I mean, I've known her because she graduated with my son, and I would always be at the football games, and I thought she was one of the most always smiling cheerleader, always happy. And one particular football game I went to, and she didn't have that smile, and I didn't know what it was. Now, even though I knew her, that my interaction with her was always on the sideline of a Westlake football game. And I said to her, like, what's wrong? Because you don't have that smile. And she just laughed it off. I'm okay, Mr. Davis. So I sort of walked up in the stands and I sat with her mother and I asked her, what's wrong? So, "Oh, no, she's fine. She's fine." So I didn't think anything about that. That was like in October or November. So I thought nothing else about that. And then I saw her. She attended one of our a school in Atlanta, and I saw her when I went to a basketball game, and she was a cheerleader there. And took a picture with her, and she tweeted it out. And when I saw her Twitter, it said, "It's been a year since I attempted to commit suicide." And then I like, hey, I wanted. So we talked, and I said, call me later. Uh, she came home. I went over her house and talked to her mother, and we talked about it. And her mother said something to me that was very much amazing. Her mother said, "Mr. Davis, that day that you came up at that football game and you asked what was wrong with her, that week she tried to commit suicide." And with her mother, she said, "What we've been thinking was, how did you pick that up and nobody in the school picked it up?" What do you say about that?
Because it's a lot more difficult to see stuff when you're in the midst of it. You can't be objective when you're in the midst of it. So you see what you want to see and you have your own biases. So, but when you're outside of that bubble, you could see it because you, from what you knew of outside, it's like, okay, well, she's always happy and bubbly. And today her demeanor is off. But in the bubble, it's not that the mom did anything wrong, but it's like, I know, my child teenagers are moody. She got an attitude today. This is like a regular pattern behavior. This is normalized because this is how she has been, for the last week. So she just, it's nothing major. But for someone else that's like, I only see her when she's happy and smiling. Even if it's not anything major, it's a time to check in. So when parents and family members, and they're like, well, why you need to go to a therapist? You can just talk to me, or you can just talk to your cousin, or it's different to talk to someone that cannot be objective about the situation. You're going to have difficulty being objective and processing and talking about that stuff. And so when you go to a therapist, the therapist is objective because there's no emotional, personal ties to that situation. I can clearly say, I can see you behaving this way. I clearly see these symptoms. I clearly see these things. But as a parent, it's like, oh, I can rationalize the things that I'm seeing. I can justify certain behaviors. And so it's not that severe. And so the kids, well, I don't just say kids, everyone needs a safe person that they can talk to. And when you go talk to a therapist, it's confidential. Outside of abuse, you can come here and say whatever. I tell my clients, you can cuss, don't cuss at me. I don't, grown-ups anyway, but I'm like, don't cuss at me. But if you choose to cuss, then this is your space. If that's how you speak, I'm not going to control how you express yourself in here as long as it's not anything aggressive or volatile to me. And so everyone needs that place where you can go and be vulnerable and talk about the things that are bothering you, that you can cry, that you can be angry, that sometimes the kids are angry at their parents and like, they just need a place to go in there and be like, oh my gosh, like she is driving me crazy. I don't want to do this. And she's trying to make me do this. You can't go to your mom and say she's driving you crazy, because you're gonna get in trouble. And so having that safe place to know, like, this is a trusted professional, that my business is gonna be confidential. I know she's not gonna go tell the school. She's not gonna go tell, somebody at the grocery store. Is gonna stay in this space, and it's a trusted, trained adult that I know is not gonna lead my child astray. That's not gonna lead me astray. And they're gonna be objective, and they're gonna have healthy ways to help me process through whatever it is that I need to work through. And so I don't want parents or anyone to beat themselves up, because it's like hindsight is 2020. Oh my gosh, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I recognize that? Because you're in the bubble, and I tell people consistently, just because you've been in a situation a long time doesn't make it normal. You can be in a dysfunctional situation for 20 years. It still don't make it normal. Like, so, but it feels normal, and that's your norm because that's all you're used to, and that's all you've experienced.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
one of the things when you're saying that's in the bubble, and one of the things that when I've talked to students, one of the things that they say, and I'm gonna come back to another group, is that sometimes they just don't feel like they have anybody that can listen.
Mhm.
And then they talk to their friends at school, and I know that I think you shared with me some time ago about a student who thought somebody needed some help,
Mhm.
and went and tried to do that. Now, today these kids are not in school.
Mhm.
They don't have somebody to really talk to them about. They are actually, when my mama getting on my nerve, but I can't go anywhere. I can't go out. I can't go out the house. So when we're talking about stay in the house, that has to be stressful, especially for young people. And I know, and I just want to bring out that, because most people think when you say a therapist, and I know that you also serve probably think you've had kids like in elementary school and on up. So can you tell just a little bit like that? Because I think that, we're talking about this and we want people to ask questions and get information, but we want them to know that therapy is not a age requirement that you have to be an adult to get.
Right. And before I touch on that, I want to say, you talk about mama getting on your nerves. You get on mama nerves too. Everybody at this point is probably getting on each other's nerves at some point, because you're in the house and you're on top of each other. You don't have the outlets and stuff that you used to have. And so they may not be able to, have that outlet in person, but you definitely need to figure out a substitute. So if you're at home, and I think some people take for granted the luxury of having a house and basements and yards and stuff like that. Every child doesn't have that. And so if you can go outside and have a conversation and sit in the car, or sit on the, be outside instead of sitting in the house, because if you talk in the house to your friends, everyone's going to hear what you're saying, or you may not feel comfortable. So figuring out alternative ways that you can go Zoom, not Zoom, because you don't need to Zoom your friend, but FaceTime your friend, or something like that, is just finding different alternatives to have that same level of communication is really, really important.
So what sort of advice would you give to students, to young people, if they still feel like they don't have anybody to talk to, but what advice would you say, hey, here are some coping skills that you can be working on, some things that you can think about? Because I know that we just have to face the reality. This is very stressful, and it doesn't have an age requirement. It's like you said, it's kids, it's adults, it's everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, one, I would say there's always someone to talk to. It may not be who you prefer to talk to, but there's always someone. There's text helplines, there's 1-800 lines, there's teachers, there's therapists, there's your parents. And so if you're to the point where you're like at a breaking point and it is severe and you're having questionable thoughts about different things to do, you're never alone. It's just, it may not be the ideal person you want to speak to, but that may be a start. So if it's like, you know what, I'm really struggling right now, Mom, I don't want to talk to you about this, but I need to talk to someone. You may not have to have that deep conversation with that parent, but that parent can then reach out to, well, let me see if I can find somebody that's taking clients and you can get some therapy. Let me reach out to your, would you feel comfortable talking to your teacher? Like, let me find someone that you're comfortable with talking to, and you can at least have that phone conversation. And so I think it's important to have that interaction. You can have coping skills, and coping skills are important. So you have to figure out what is important for that kid. So if the kid likes reading, so going to read books. If that kid is athletic, I know my son has a weight bench in his room. He has his bike. He has the Xbox. He has all these different things. And although when people think coping skills, you're like thinking like that's a clinical term. So coping skill, it must be something, some clinical terminology of this intervention that you're doing. But if you're playing a video game, that's a coping skill. So being mindful that, I know as parents are like, well, we're going to monitor how much TV time our kids get. And like, you get 30 minutes. And I know I used to be the mom, like Monday through Thursdays, there's no TV. That's all out the window. I'm saying that's all that's gone out the window for my sanity and for theirs too. So they get more TV time and more game time because they need to have a coping skill. And I realize these kids have had everything snatched from them. The kids and the parents, kids who are active in sports, kids who do art, kids who are in clubs, kids who just enjoy getting on the bus to go to school, like everything is abruptly taken away. So things that people didn't realize were coping skills were gone. Like you driving to work and clearing your head, even though you're going to work, is a coping skill because you in the car listening to your music, you drinking your coffee, you might be listening to a sermon, and that's just part of your daily routine. But that was one of those healthy outlets that you had that helped prepare you for the day. And so just being mindful of the fact that you cannot take everything away and not add something to it. So if all of their normal coping skills are gone, their normal outlets are gone, what's the alternative that you're going to substitute? Whether that's reading, whether that's, they have like watch parties where my son, him and his friends, like it's some kind of watch app, they can watch the same movie and then they're talking to each other on the phone.
That's the 2 a.m., 3 o'clock when they up all night, right?
Man, listen, you definitely have to be mindful of that because it's funny because my son, he'll like fall asleep on, like I look up and I'm like, why are y'all still on FaceTime? Like they're both on FaceTime and they just sleep. I'm like, what is happening here? But they had to figure out an alternative because I'm not allowing my children to go do anything. Like they're in the house. They have not gone. We go to the outside or down the street, but as far as like interacting, we still shut down over here. So I definitely know like it's important for him to have that outlet and substitute. So that's why they have more.
That's that midnight movie going. Well, and I saw my son doing that it was watching a movie and then it was on the side. He's saying, here's a list of all of these people that we're just watching the movie and we're just talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that is a coping skill. And even with some of the kids that I work with now, their coping skill seems to be, I'm going to sleep and I wake up at 3 p.m.
Okay, no, now that I don't recommend that because even with everything that's going on and finding coping skills, the kids need to still have some semi-structure of a schedule. And so it doesn't have to be rigid where it's like, okay, you're still at bed at, 8 o'clock and you're up at 7, unless that's what you choose to do and that's what works for your family. But it's super, super important for these kids to have some type of routine. It's important for them to get adequate sleep. It's important for them to have nourishment for their bodies. You're thinking about they got depressive symptoms, but they're running off of Doritos, Takis, and Ho-Hos. Like your body doesn't have the nourishment it needs. So you're fatigued and you're dragging. It's not because you're depressed, it's because you keep eating junk food. You have to eat something that's nourishing to your body so your body can create the energy and do what it needs to do. And so just being mindful in all of this, like waking up, staying up in the middle of the night and waking up at 3 o'clock, that's not an ideal schedule that a kid should have unless there's some extremely extenuating circumstances that I can't even think of. That is why that is happening. Because I know parents have different work schedules and all kind of stuff going on. So I don't know. I can't think of anything that would make that.
And when I'm saying I'm mentioning it's my 20-year-old, the college student, and him and his friends. Because again, it's one day, I'm in college, it's March, and and nothing gonna happen to us because you think that you're on a college campus, you're just safe. And then all of a sudden, I know some of the kids that were here, they were on spring break, and then they said, don't come back.
Right. What?
They like, oh yeah, oh good. You know, we got to extend the spring break. And then a week, 2 days later, like, don't come back for good. You're done.
Right.
And you got to think about that. I'm thinking about if it's March and these are people that you basically are around 9 to 10 months of the year. And all of a sudden, I'm not on this college campus. Now I got to go home. I don't have this study group because I'm trying to do my online work. My boo is gone. My boo is gone back to California.
That's a big one. Everybody missing their booze.
Right. So, I mean, it's something that real, and some parents may not want to talk about, but if you're a college student, that's like, you know, hey, you went to a HBCU just like I went to a HBCU, and and, and when you have a relationship, and then all of a sudden you're like, most college students like, I can't wait till the summer over. When you in high school, it's like, I'd be glad when it's summer. When you in college, it's like, I'd be glad when the summer is over. But those kids, how do you cope and how do you deal with those type things? I know we talked about the high school, but it's college, and not only it's college, it's like I I, I don't think it's that much different. But now my child is not graduating from college. Now my child who had an internship set for the summer cannot do that internship, which now affects the job that I may have.
Okay.
And before you answer that, just let me just say, if anybody have any questions, just go ahead and put that in the chat and we'll bring up that question, but go ahead.
Okay. And I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to answer the question about the little kid, the elementary school kids really quickly as well. When it comes to like therapy and kids being in therapy, there's you can have kids, it's kids in therapy as young as like 18 months. I've had several people contacting me like, do you see like toddlers? I'm like, no, that's not my thing, but there are therapists that do. You know, so you could actually, because they do play therapy, and so you can do play therapy at a very young age. So I do have younger clients that I've seen as young as 4, and it's interventions that they can do and it's age appropriate on their level. So of course, a session for a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old is very different than a 16-year-old or a 20-year-old, but there's still tools and interventions available that will help them learn to express their emotions. It helps them verbalize and communicate. It helps them normalize therapy. It gives them tools and coping skills and things of that nature. So definitely all ages from, you know, toddler to seniors or elderly, however you want to term it, can come to therapy and benefit from therapy. Now, the college kids, that is very interesting because now they grown, right? So it's like, what you mean I got to come home at a certain time? Like I'm grown. Like I've been away at college. Like I don't go back to my dorm till 2:00 in the morning. What you talking about? So it's a whole different adjustment and a different level of grace that I think, and patience that I think parents need to have, because they have been off, they're young adults and they have been doing the thing. So, you know, I know you have your rules and however the rules you have for your house and how you run your house, that's on you, but also be mindful of like what that child's experience. It's an adjustment period to come back to, I can do whatever I want to do. And then like, now I got to be in the house by midnight. I can't go nowhere. I'm grown, but you can't tell me, you telling me I can't see my boo and, you know, all this stuff. And if I wasn't here, I'll be seeing my boo. So kids, don't get in trouble. Don't forget who brought you into this world. But I think just being able to have open communication about like, hey, mom, our dad, I get your rules and stuff like that, but I'm a young adult, and can we compromise? Like what is up for negotiation in me coming back home? Because it's very difficult to abruptly have to come back and adjust to all the freedom that you once had to absolutely nothing. Like you still get in, clean your room. You can't come in my house at this time, wash the dishes. And you're like, what? Like, for real?
Some of those situations is not coming home late because they can't go anywhere. Most of our, you know, city of South Fulton and College Park, East Point, Union City, most of them like, hey, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, everything's closed. So you have no way where to go. And
you're not supposed to be out. I don't know how many people abided by that.
Right. But as a parent, and I guess you the same way thinking like this with your boys. You can't be coming over to visit my son. I need you to stay away because I don't know what you bringing in the house.
Right. And so that's where the open communication comes. And just because you talk about something don't mean you like it, don't mean it's a happy conversation, but it needs to be had. And it needs to be alternatives put in place. Like you said, ain't nobody coming up over here. Mine ain't going nowhere, and ain't nobody coming over here. I don't care how you feel about it. This is what I choose to do in my household. However, I gave my son an alternative. I said, I'll do a drive-by. He said, Mommy, a drive-by? I said, drive-by. He said, can you tell me what a drive-by is? Because when I think about drive-by, I don't think that's the same thing. And I'm like, really? Not that kind of drive-by. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to see your friend, I will drive you to your friend's house and they can stand in their yard and y'all can wave. And he can't come to the car. She can't come to the car. That's the drive-by. That's about as good as you're going to get is anything in person until I feel comfortable to allow something else. And so that was my compromise. I'll do a drive-by. But the other stuff, it's not happening. But there are some parents that allow it. You know, you have to do what you feel is best for your household. Because I don't want to shame anybody for their decisions if they decide to go out and do stuff or allow people in their house. I just know the risk, and it's not something that I'm willing to take for my family. So I act accordingly. So having that communication and giving possibly compromises, but also understanding that the coping skills and the different alternatives that you have is FaceTime, movie watch party, virtual stuff, whatever it is, the alternative that you have, making sure they have the resources and they know what the alternatives are that are available. And so they're grieving. Like everyone is grieving. Everyone's grieving prom, the parents, graduation, the students, what was supposed to happen, the summer, the spring season, the internships, the freedom that they once had that they no longer have. And so there are going to be emotional responses. There's going to be anger. It's going to be frustration. It's going to be depression. It's going to be so many different things that people are experiencing that it's important to talk about it, because what you don't want to do is isolate and internalize it, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds, and it's going to come out one way or the other. So if you allow it to keep building, it's going to explode, and it's typically going to be an anger outburst. Some people call it mental breakdown. It's going to come out. So what you want to do is really promote being proactive and having an outlet and getting that. You can be mad. What do you do with that anger? Now, if you're in the house trying to punch a wall, we got a problem. But if you're angry and you say, Mommy, I'm mad, I'm upset, and I'm going to go in the yard and go play basketball, okay, that's fine. You have to channel that and have some type of outlet available for the kids, whether they're in elementary school or whether they're college age. And parents need one as well, because some parents, like myself, we're working, we're mommying, we're cooking, we're nursing, we're doing all the things under the sun. And so it's like, what is a healthy outlet so I don't explode? And unfortunately, a lot of parents have been turned into alcohol. They're drinking more because they're in the house, and that's an easy coping skill. But you also have to understand that your children are watching you. So while you're telling them you need to figure out how to deal with your anger and your attitude, and the only way you're dealing with yours is because you're going to get a bottle of wine or some Tito's, they're looking at you like, well, you're not dealing with your stuff in a healthy way either. So I'm supposed to be the kid, and I'm supposed to control my emotions and have my stuff together, but you on your third glass of wine. How does that work?
I'm interested that you say that, because the other day, I think, and I didn't think about it until now when you brought it up, is that I went by a package store and the parking lot was packed. I mean, cars were just packed. And I'm like, okay, everything else seemed to be closed and empty, but the package store, traffic's backed up to get into the line. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're saying, it's the drinking, and we don't know how long this is going to take place, but we do realize that if you don't talk to somebody or don't do anything, that you may say, I'm okay, but you're not okay. So what about that?
It's important to just be honest. It's okay not to be okay for everybody, for the mom, the dad, the teacher, the therapist. I'm not okay every day. Some days it's harder. And I will just say today was a difficult start of my day. because I was looking at the news as far as the runner who was killed, and being a mom of Black boys, it was really a struggle for me today. But I had to practice self-care. I turned on a comedy and I watched comedy. I took about a 20-minute nap. I ended up, before this, because we the chef too, I cooked dinner, listened to Beyonce in the kitchen and dancing, and had my playlist and stuff going. So it's like, you're not going to have a good day every single day, but it's important to be open and honest about where you are. So if it's like, I'm okay, and that person just refuses to open up and tell you, you clearly, by observing they're not okay. You can see they're isolated, they're staying in their room, they're withdrawn, they may not be eating, they're not talking. Like, you have family and that's the only family member that won't come out and won't interact, then it's time to have a conversation. Because I know you say you're okay, but I always use this, you're presenting as if something is wrong. And my son Corey, he's so tickled because he'll get an attitude. I'm like, well, you're presenting as if you have an attitude. Because I don't have no attitude. Well, you're presenting so I'm telling you what I'm observing of you. He's like, like having a therapist for a mom, I don't know if he likes that all the time.
And I want to come back to that, and I think we've talked about it before, but there's a question, and I know that some kids that as adults, well, I watch movies and I see something like stuff, and I'm just like, this can't be real. I'm just like, this just cannot be real. This seems like some movie, pandemic or something. It's like a movie, and it's just bad. And people looking at it, and we're thinking like, okay, as an adult, I'm saying, I just can't believe this is taking place. Now, what about those kids who are watching the news, who are hearing about all of people who are testing positive, that are hearing about all of the people that are dying? What do you, how can a parent sort of talk to maybe a 4 or 5 year old, somebody that's in elementary school, that they really, really don't understand this, and to them they like, mama, we gonna die, is the world ending? How can a parent sort of deal with a child that age? Because it's hard to just say COVID-19, coronavirus, because they don't understand that what they hear is and see that if and when they go out, they see everybody with a mask. Mm-hmm. And that makes them think, when they watch TV, like, well, I watched pandemic, I watched this, everybody died, are we gonna die? So how does a parent sort of help a child with that?
Well, I think it's definitely important to be age appropriate. And so for a 4 or 5-year-old, they really can't conceptualize, like when we talk about like death and what's in statistics and the likelihood and percentage, and they're not going to understand that. They know, like, I seen this, they said we're going to die, and it's scary. And so I think the best thing to do is really be age appropriate and explain it to them. And so, yes, we need to wash our hands. And I saw a video, someone posted like YouTube, like showing like little kids, like if you wash your hands and you put it in pepper, you see that's the example of the germs and it spreads away. And so just really talking to your child and saying, yes, sometimes people get sick, but we are washing our hands and we're doing things so we can be safe. And so when you see the mask on, the mask is for protection. So how you see, like Superman has on a cape, and his cape he puts on because it's like his blanket of protection or something. And so when we put our mask on, it's like our protection. And so you get all into it, and it's like, oh, we're gonna go to the store. Like, where's our cape? Where's our cape? And you get your little mask on. It's like, you put a little S on it or something. And it's like, now instead of it being like this fearful thing, it's like, oh, we're going out. Like, we're gonna put our cape on and we're gonna make sure that we're protected from the bad germs. And so now it's like, instead of being terrified, it's like, we got on our protective gear and we're ready and we're going to go get our groceries. And so now the kid is like, oh, this is mommy, we were going to go back and fight the germs and put our mask on, so it's all in how you frame things to your kids. And so I personally, when I have a 4 or 5-year-old watching the news, I don't know if that was an error, because I don't think it's age appropriate, but if they happen to see it, you just have to reframe it and do it in a way that relates to them. They understand it's like, okay, it's not a bad thing. But also normalize their feelings. It's okay to be scared. It's okay. Don't you think Superman was scared when he had to do this? that looks scary, but he did what he had to do, and so however you can frame it in that way is helpful for them. And so I think that's probably like the best example that I can use in just educating them on germs and washing their hands and stuff that they should have already kind of been learning in preschool, or that you're telling them, like, 20 seconds, sing your ABC song and wash your hands, don't touch your face, stuff like that.
Okay. And one of the things that, I mean, as part of Mental Health Month, one of the things is always stop the stigma. Uh, so can you, and I know you sort of mentioned briefly about a client. So what can a person who's seeking treatment, what can they expect when they reach out to you?
Um, hmm. What can they expect? I think when my clients come into therapy, they already know, because I do free 15-minute consultations. So when they call me, I've already kind of prepped them, like, okay, well, what is the presenting issue? A little bit about myself. If I'm able to help you. Like, every therapist is not the therapist for you, because like I said, I don't see toddlers. So if you come and talk about, let's do play therapy with your 18-month-old, I'm like, baby, that ain't for me. I can give you a referral though. And so the free consultation kind of like breaks the ice of like what to expect, because they may be nervous. They're like, I don't know what this looks like. And so that's the opportunity to say, hey, it's normal to be anxious. It's normal to be like upset, or not upset, but nervous about or anxious about coming into therapy and talking to somebody that you don't know. That's completely normal. But I commend you for contacting me, because it takes a lot of courage to make that phone call to set the appointment. And so just know that I'm here to support you. So, whatever you need from me that's within reason, I'm here to help. And so that's my whole thing of like my style when I'm having my sessions with clients. It feels like we're talking. It feels like, like, oh, we just chit chatting. I'm working hard. Okay. It is not just talking to a stranger. It's not like talking to your cousin. Like, I am professionally, clinically trained. I'm thinking, I'm processing, I'm reframing, I'm paraphrasing, I'm doing all these different techniques. But in my delivery, it feels like she cool. We just talking. And you're getting all these tools and coping skills and insight and processing memories and emotions. And it's like, oh, it really wasn't that bad. So I think when you come to therapy, what you can expect when you come to me, or when you find the right fit of whoever you go see, is finding someone that you're comfortable with, that you connect with. Every therapist is not for you. And if you find yourself contacting me or contacting someone else and it's like, I ain't really feeling her like that, don't stop. Like, keep going until you find a therapist that's for you. I'm not for everybody. It took me like 3 therapists before I found my therapist, and I don't take it personally. At the end of the day, I want you to get the help that you need. So if you meet with me, you're like, I don't think so. I'm not gonna be like, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't this client want to see me again? I'm freaking awesome. I'm like, okay, you need a referral. Let me help you out. Because it's not about me. None of this is about me. Like, therapists don't bring their own biases and their own stuff into the session. It's about you and what you need and who you want to be. I don't give advice. I don't tell you what to do. I guide you. I help you give insight. I help you process and support you in whatever it is that you feel like you need to do, and you need support in doing that. Or you want to do something, but you don't even know where to start. People say, like, just pray about it. You're like, well, okay, I prayed, but how do I implement? How do I execute something to make changes? I'm praying, but I don't know what to do with that. So, it's just really giving practical tools and insight on how do I execute the things that I want to execute in my life in a healthy way. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah. And we've talked about this, and it is probably, I'm about to say something, and you probably have an idea what I'm about to talk about, because it's personal. And you've talked to me. You haven't been. You're my friend, so not my therapist, but we have talked, and I've asked you certain things. But and I'm just going to share, I guess, for the people out there, because it's easy for me to. Mental health has been a real important issue to me. And some people may misinterpret that. And I just put out, they may think, hey, he's just doing it because. It's not because. So I had a therapist, and uh, and my life was, I don't even know what you call it. It was like I was in denial about a lot of stuff. So I had a brother, I had a sister, and I had a grandmother that all passed probably within a 3 or 4 year time period. And I did nothing. But I was working. I was going to court, and I figured like I got to do this because I'm an attorney. I got to do this. I'm going to court. But the clients that I had were, I mean, and I tell people like I represented people who were the worst of the worst. When I say that, I mean people who had committed rape, murder. During that time, I had a guy that was charged with killing an 18-month-old baby.
Mm.
I had a 15-year-old who killed his 15-year-old girlfriend because she wanted to end the relationship. And for years, I'm like, I'm just doing this, but all of that was wearing down
Mhm.
on me. And my life was just, I don't know, I was looking for means, things just to escape, which were not the correct things to do. And I was saying, and I would even be in church every week, but that wasn't enough. It was just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm going through, but my life feel like it's whatever. And then I just had a situation with the judge, and I think we talked about this in Cobb County, where she held me in contempt and put me in jail that was supposed to be for 20 days. And that ended up 60 days for no real reason. So prior to that, I had been diagnosed as clinical depressed, taking medication, and I went, 60 days with no medication or anything whatsoever. So by the time I got out, that I had lost my job. People noticed that I had somewhat vanished because I was very active in the community, but nobody knew exactly what I was going through. I mean, it was like family members. I just couldn't trust certain family members, and I didn't have the friends, whatever, to talk about. So I just found the wrong things to try to escape. And then I like, hey, I'm going to see a therapist. And when I got in there, I've said, oh, here's the couch. And I asked her, should I sit on the couch, lay on the couch? She said, whatever. And then we start talking. And there was an instant that I would literally break down. I didn't break down knowing everything I was going through, but when I was with that therapist, I broke down. In the midst of that, the situation got worse because while I was going through that, dealing with all of that, then my grandmother died. My other grandmother died. And, and the person that I talked to most was my father. Very close relationship with my father. I always talked to him. And he called me, or he saw me the day that my grandmother died. And he knew what I've been going through. He knew that I was going through therapy. And he asked me how I was doing because he knew that I always had an issue with death. And I'm like, I don't know. That was the last conversation I had with him because he was dead 48 hours later.
Mm.
And when that happened, I had to call my therapist and go and sit and talk. So I had both grandmothers, a brother, a sister, and dad die. And it's in a relatively short period of time. And then I was in a career where this is actually killing me. And I'm not just sharing this with other people because we've talked about this. So I thought that part of my mental thing was I needed to get away from the criminal defense type stuff.
Mm.
Uh, and where I am now that I'm going to court. Most of the kids I had was between 17, 25. Most of them have between an 8th or 10th grade education. So I'm like, I'm not making a difference in a courtroom because even if I can get them less time when they get out, they still don't have an education. So that's why, I transitioned from that being a college and career coach, uh, And so I see what those kids are going through. I see, so it's not something like, hey, it's not an issue. It's, I mean, campaign type issue, because I know some people just think that. But we've talked about this when we started this. I wasn't running or anything like that, but I think it's important, especially with our kids. When I hear high school kids thinking about suicide, and I know what you're doing in the community, and what I just want to make sure is that if people want to, I want them to come have an opportunity. I know you talked about a free consultation, but how can they reach you if they want to come and talk to you? Because I think personally this is important, and I know that you're concerned about the students. I know you're concerned about parents, and I know as a resident in the South Fulton area that you're community based and you're just trying to help and serve people.
Mhm. Well, first, I just want to commend you for sharing something so personal and being so transparent. Because, like I said, to express yourself and to talk about personal issues requires vulnerability. And when you're vulnerable, you have to make sure you're vulnerable to people that are trustworthy. And so when you open up and you share information online, you're not guaranteed to get that because you don't know who has access to that, who will see this. And so the fact that you were willing and open enough to share something so personal for everyone to benefit from it, I just want to say I really appreciate that and I applaud you. And so one of the things I know when I first met you is that you were really active. Like you were forced to be reckoned with. Like you were so focused and honed in on doing what needed to be done for those kids. You weren't taking no for an answer when you were hitting roadblocks. You were figuring out other ways to get around them. And the ultimate goal of everything was, like, how can I help these kids? These kids are not getting what they need, and they're telling me what they need. I see what they need. And whether people like me or not, or how my approach is, I'm going to do what needs to be done. I'm going to sacrifice whatever I need to sacrifice for these kids. And so I worked with you like in the school when I did the panel for Fulton County and then at the church. So it's just like your dedication to make sure that the students have what they need in reference to mental health. I definitely applaud that, and I appreciate that. And I've seen you, like boots on the ground. Like I see you in the community. I know one time you was doing so much stuff. I'm like, well, when do you rest? Like, when do you do self-care? Because every time I look up, I'm like, he had this, he had that. Like, child, like when do you sleep? And so I just wanted to definitely say that because I think it took a lot of courage for you to, disclose what you just disclosed. Now, in reference to, and I want to say this before I say how to reach me. There's a lot of trauma in the community. It's a lot of trauma that kids are exposed to, that adults are exposed to. And when you experience that trauma, it impacts your ability to focus, it impacts your relationship, it impacts your perspective on the world in general. And so being able to have resources and a grief is a form of trauma. And especially when it's someone that's like unexpectedly that passes away. And so being able to be aware, like, you still need to get help to process and work through those issues. And when you have people passing back to back to back to back, it's just more complex. And so, being mindful of that trauma and working in the court system and the stories that you heard and the pictures you had to see and the testimonies that you had to hear, sometimes you have to ask yourself the hard question is this worth my peace? Is it worth me having this job if I'm stressed out, I'm miserable, I can't function the way I need to function? And if it's not, you might need to make a shift. Like even with people now that are stressed out because, you got furloughed or laid off, and how did your job treat you? Now you went out there, you've been breaking your back for this company, you ain't took your vacation days, you working when you get off the clock, you're doing all these things to sacrifice to build their company. And then when we're in the midst of a pandemic, they're like, oh, we're gonna have to lay you off, or, go file for unemployment. And you have to make yourself a priority, because at the end of the day, when these companies, when these courtrooms, they can replace you like that. You only get one life, your kids only get one parent. And if you kill yourself and break your back because you're trying to satisfy that company, if you die today, they're gonna put somebody else in your place. Your kids and your family can't do that. So sometimes it may require a pay cut. you may have to make those hard decisions, but everything is not worth the financial part that you may get from it. If you got high blood pressure and you got depression and you got anxiety because you double, triple checking your work because every time you turn in something, you're worried about it not being right. You have to make those hard decisions and figure out what's worth your mental health and your well-being, and also understanding that some people need medication. And I didn't want us to close without me definitely saying this. When I came into the field, I was one of those therapists like, we're going to talk through everything. Ain't no medicine. I don't believe in that. You know, we can figure out other interventions. And what I learned in the field and what I learned in school, some people need medication. Some diagnoses, you have to have medication. It's just something that it's imperative because of chemical imbalances, functioning and stuff like that. So if you happen to be one of those people who need medication, I want us to break the shame and the stigma with that, because you wouldn't tell a diabetic not to take their insulin. And mental health is a medical condition. A mental health diagnosis is a medical condition. And so if you need medication to balance and stabilize you, then take that medication and be okay with that. It's not anything wrong with that. Sometimes you take medication in the short term, and sometimes you have to take medication long term. But when you talk about people who are suicidal, who are unstable, the purpose when they're getting admitted into the hospitals is they need to be stabilized. So when you go to the hospital, you're going to be stabilized on some type of medicine so you can have a baseline. But what I tell people is that need medication, that don't want medication, when you come to talk therapy and you need medication or you are suicidal, this is the baseline. When you come into therapy, you don't have your medicine, you down here. We're trying to get you up here with talk. So it's going to take a lot longer and a lot harder to even get you up to a baseline. So we're starting at a deficit. So if you take your medicine and we start here, we have a foundation that we can build on. You go from here and on up and up and up. And you may not need medication, but you may need it temporarily just to stabilize so we don't start at that deficit. And so there's not any shame with, taking medication if you need it. And I just really want to make sure that I made a point to say that, because I know I was one of those people like no medication, but some people just need medication and it's okay. So I know I just said a lot, but I just wanted to really make sure I made a point in saying that.
Yeah, and I know like some of the other stuff that people do, working out, running, relaxing. So there's a lot of things besides the medication. But okay, we're about out of time, but I appreciate, and I will be sharing more information how to get back with Patrice on this, and whatever you're going through, whatever your problem is, as she normally say, it's the pit stop, right?
Yep. You're one pit stop away from healing.
Yeah. And Miss Brown is on here, and Patrice, I want to connect you and Miss Brown later. Miss Brown is doing some stuff in Southport and things, so I want to connect you with her so we can get some things done. So again, I want to thank you for this. We did record this, so we'll be sharing it, and next week we'll be doing this for the next 4 weeks. And maybe Patricia, you can come back. I know that you have a lot of clients that you meet, and if the schedule doesn't work, but maybe in a couple of weeks when you're free, that we can bring you back to talk to some other things. And also, Miss Brown, I want to make sure we get you probably in 2 weeks, if you can check that for me. So until we talk again, I just want everybody to just remember what we talked about. There are coping skills. There's things to do. And like the commercial said, if you don't get help, where? At Charlotte, get help somewhere, get it at the pit stop. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
All right. And Ms. Brown said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bye.